Hello everyone, and welcome to Spatial Exploits. On today's episode, we're going to talk about the recent Barcelona versus Real Sociedad match that happened in match day 1 of La Liga, which kicked off the 2021 to 2022 season. And the match came amidst a lot of heavy headlines, especially the one around club legend and superstar Lionel Messi moving from the Catalan club in Spain over to Paris, France to join PSG on a 2-year contract. And with Lionel Messi moving away, what we find is that Messi was obviously the top scorer with 30 goals, and his level of production as well as playmaking in terms of assists and expected assists will be hard to replicate for the team. So with 85 goals scored by Barcelona, they were a pretty porous defense as well. I mean, looking at the top 5, they were allowing the same amount of goals as their opponents on the weekend, Real Sociedad, in 38 goals. So having a very high-powered offense led by Messi, but having him no longer available for selection means that Ronald Koeman and Barcelona had to think about Real Sociedad and breaking them down in different ways than they would have been. And so the match overall presented lots of different tactical flavoring that we've come to expect from Barcelona in the past, and then there have been a few tactical changes that they've strayed from as a necessary way to survive in a life without their superstar Lionel Messi. So without further ado, let's dive into the analysis of the match. Real Sociedad came into the match on August 15, 2021, this past Sunday, at the Nou Camp in Barcelona with the following lineup. So their coach Emmanuel Alguacil had a 4-2-3-1, the standard formation he's been using for even last season coming into this season. The key man missing for Real Sociedad was actually Alexander Isak, who had a pretty good performance against Spain in Seville as Spain and Sweden both kicked off the tournament. With Isak missing, Porto got the start as the striker role, but it was sort of a fluid formation in the sense that Oyarzabal as well as Januzaj were able to pivot in and out of this positioning. So Porto was the out-and-out striker, but at the same time, he was able to build up some play in the few chances that Real had in the first half of the match. Alongside him, in the 3-man midfield, you had Adnan Januzaj on the right-hand side, David Silva in the center, and then Mikel Oyarzabal, the team captain, on the left-hand side. And again, all 3 positions were fluid, so you would see Silva on either flank from time to time, and not just sequestered to the center of the pitch. From the 2-man midfield line, there was Zubimendi on the left-hand side and Mikel Merino, who actually captained the Spanish national team during the recent Olympics, where Spain went to the final and then lost out to Brazil on the gold medal match. In the defense, there was Zaldua on the right back side and then Munoz on the left back side, and then the central defensive partnership was between Elizondo and Lenormand. In goal, there was Ramiro. These 5 players on the side, these were the 5 substitutes that did come into the match as it progressed. Obviously, there were more players than this on the substitute bench, but these were the 5 that actually got to come into the game. Looking at the Barcelona side, obviously the loss of Messi doesn't mean that the formation is going to change, especially with a Ronald Koeman-like figure who has been through the Barcelona system himself. So the 4-3-3 is something that the Dutch espouse, and it's something that has come to signify the way Barcelona plays stylistically. So Koeman went with Neto in goal, as well as a defensive partnership between Piqué and new signing Eric Garcia. So Eric Garcia was actually a Man City player that Pep Guardiola has come to rate really highly, and he's only 20 years old at the moment, but he has really good control on the ball and passing, and his ability in one-on-one defensive situations. He's only 6 feet tall, so he's a little bit short, but at the same time, that's the same height Sergio Ramos is, and that guy's done pretty well for himself. So as long as Eric Garcia is getting game time at Barcelona, which is something he was not getting with a very deep Manchester City squad, where you have Aymeric Laporte and John Stones and Ruben Diaz, it's just hard to break through in a team that stacked defensively. So with his move to Barcelona, hopefully he can maintain some semblance of a consistent starting spot. So with Piqué and Garcia set in stone, on the right back side, it was a familiar face in Serginho Dest, who had a pretty decent campaign last year, but he is going to have to fight for his starting 11 role because Emerson Royal, who came in from Real Betis on a free transfer this summer to Barcelona, he's going to put up a pretty good fight for this starting right back position. At left back, we have Jordi Alba And there aren't too many ready-made replacements for Alba in the starting 11, so he is going to be able to reasonably hold on to that positioning as long as he goes the rest of the year without any injuries. In the midfield, you could realistically make a case that this is one of the strongest midfields in all of Europe. Over the last year or so, Pedri has played in a tremendous amount of games, so for him to be immediately inserted into the starting lineup, having just come back from the Olympics midweek, is a testament to his stamina, his work ethic, his ability on the ball, and his importance to the team, especially as the club captain and living legend Messi departs. On the left-hand side, there's the usually reliable and the sensational Frenkie de Jong, who's going to be responsible for ensuring that the right half of the defensive structure here between Griezmann, Dest, and de Jong was able to flourish and allow Griezmann and Dest to be fluidly interchanging their positionings in order to still go ahead and attack relentlessly. And then when the opportunities presented themselves, de Jong, who's a master passer of the ball, was able to actually lead to one of the goals, as we'll come to find out. And finally, in the central defensive midfielder role, you have Sergio Busquets, who has been recently labeled as an offensive genius by his former teammate Xavi, and he's not wrong in that sense, because Busquets is able to connect the team through his passing and his penetrative assessment of where the weak spots are defensively, and Busquets is the one player more than any other in world football that has the ability to think 3, 4, 5 moves ahead. So when he's making a pass to Pedri, for example, he's aware that that will lead to a pass to here, to Braithwaite, that will lead it to Memphis, that will create a crossing opportunity to Griezmann, and that can go in for the goal. So Busquets over time has historically proved that he doesn't think one pass ahead, he thinks 10 passes ahead. And that quality is what allows me to say confidently that this is actually one of the best midfields in Europe that's playing right now. The forward line for Barcelona has new signing Memphis Depay at the central striker role. But really, Memphis, in the way that he played this role throughout the match, he was both a central striker as well as a link-up person, as well as a Neto connector, in terms of if there was a long ball from Neto, it usually found the head of Memphis or Braithwaite, and then those two were able to connect interchangeably with some of the midfield players in Griezmann in order to keep progressing the ball forward. Because there were times where some of the pressure that Sociedad was putting on the Barcelona back half of the team, it was forcing Neto to go for the long ball option, and with the rest of the Sociedad team pushed up, it was relatively easy for Memphis and Braithwaite and Griezmann to hold on to the ball from that long of a pass from Neto. Martin Braithwaite put himself into the starting lineup on the left-hand side, but as we'll see throughout, he was able to interchange his positioning with Memphis so that Memphis at times appeared on the left-hand side and Braithwaite was through the middle. And then you have Antoine Griezmann on the right-hand side, and Griezmann has been part of a lot of news and headlines where he's been connected to back to his previous club, Atletico Madrid, who do want to try to sign him if possible, but the grand wages that Griezmann is on currently at Barcelona is one of the things that's preventing him from having to move to Atletico. And if he's not moving, then obviously he's more than capable of retaining a starting role with Ronald Koeman's lineups. So he was right here and willing to do the job. So without further ado, let's start exploring some of the tactics. So by the time the match was over, it was a 4-2 win for Barcelona, and really going into the halftime break, the scoreline was already 2-0 with a goal from Piqué to get the match opened up, as well as a Braithwaite goal just as halftime rolled around. The rest of the match, there was a goal from Lobete and Oyarzabal on the Real Sociedad side within the last 10 minutes of the match, but really another goal from Braithwaite and a goal from substitute Sergio Roberto in extra time of the second half was really what Barcelona needed to go to 4-2. So the scoreline does suggest that it was a little bit of a offensive affair, and that's not completely wrong in the sense that for Barcelona it certainly was, but for Real Sociedad, for basically the majority of the match, they had a massive trouble breaking through the press of Barcelona, especially as the Barcelona players figured out how to really attack the back line and the build-up from the back that Sociedad was trying to build out. Overall, statistically, this is how the match played out. So there were 13 shots created by Barcelona compared to Real's 11, but really Barcelona was way more effective with their shots because 8 of them were actually on target, where 4 of them turned into goals, whereas with Sociedad only 3 were on target with 2 turning into goals. Additionally, the dominance that Barcelona displayed in their possession and retention of the ball is shown by the possession metric, where the Catalan club maintained 60+% of the ball in terms of possession, whereas Real only managed 38%. Barcelona was also overwhelming compared to Real in terms of the number of passes that they attempted, as well as the accuracy numbers on the passes. And with the amount of yellow cards and fouls shown, it's pretty clear that Real Sociedad, once they realized the possession number was something they're going to be losing out to, they quickly reverted to a heavily defensive team that looked to counterattack. But when you do something like that, you're usually on your back foot defensively, which meant there were tons and tons of fouls that Real was committing as the match progressed. If we go back to the tactics, the way this kind of unfolded is, in typical Barcelona fashion, they would be fanning out the rest of the team from the defensive line out, and then spreading Eric Garcia and Gerard Piqué to be right next to or slightly above in terms of the lines from Neto, so they could build out from the back. Additionally, Busquets would at times drop in, so he could have another passing option for Neto, as well as if Piqué or Garcia had the ball, they could go out wide to Dest, who was creating width on the flanks for the right-hand side, and then Alba, similarly for Piqué, became a go-to passing option. With Braithwaite and Memphis, they were basically operating in these higher-up areas of the pitch, and over time, these two wide players would tend to move inside of the pitch, allowing Dest to go up here and Alba to also go up here to help build out the play. Pedri and De Jong would do the Pedri and De Jong things, which means lots of possession of the ball, passing creatively, and looking for ways to maintain the possession in order for there to be a safe passage of the ball from their link-up play over to the offensive half. If we look at the rest of the Sociedad team defensively, they were basically going man-to-man, so David Silva was pressed up against Pedri for a lot of the match. Oyarzabal was helping to press both De Jong and Garcia through angled runs, and same thing for Januzaj on this hand with Jordi Alba. But because of the lack of numbers being committed and these left backs and right backs on the Real side having to decide between covering Braithwaite or Alba, they were usually erring on the side of caution, so they would be pressed up against their man, which essentially led to more man-on-man situations. So then you have these two center back pairings where Memphis, using his pace, can begin exploiting them. Again, with Dest pushing up and providing the width on the right-hand flank with Griezmann, who's also a dangerous passer and attacker himself, there was not a whole lot that Zubimendi and Merino could do. They were usually caught within this no-man's land of Barcelona players as they were attacking, and then if Pedri and De Jong broke loose, then yet again there would be a man advantage or they would be on equal footing, and at that point there was not much more that Real was equipped to do other than commit fouls. So Lenormand had quite a few fouls on the game, and he escaped without a red card, but really the type of game he was playing, he was teetering right on the edge of getting carded. Additionally, defensively, Real was equipped to go ahead and do man marking, or they were zonal marking and moving along with the side of the pitch that the ball was on predominantly. So some of the things that would take place is if Barcelona was overloading one of the halves, then the rest of the Real team would be pretty much pressed into that half too to make sure that the possession of the ball was secured. What would take place is a press up to Griezmann from Lenormand, as well as Dest here causing trouble for Munoz. So usually with the capable passing of De Jong and Griezmann and Pedri, they were able to find Memphis in these sort of open positionings where he had clear chances on goal. And if it wasn't Memphis, who was then interchanging with Braithwaite as the match progressed, then Braithwaite was getting open shots on goal as well. So with these types of angled runs coming in from Memphis and Braithwaite, they were able to feed off of what the defense was expecting, which was Griezmann to come in as well at times, but he was able to remain more on the defensive side, and this is actually a genius move on part of Koeman, because one of the things that he actually innovated on in this match that we haven't quite seen before is he realized that Serginho Dest, for all his attacking prowess, is a little bit weaker defensively. One of the things he's really good with is his defensive work rate. So there were times where you would expect Griezmann to be operating in these spots, but you actually had Serginho Dest operating there, and you had Griezmann kind of hanging back as a makeshift right back, where if things broke loose or the ball was lost in the attacking third, then very quickly, if they got the ball here, they were able to break free and try to get a pass out to Oyarzabal. But what would end up happening is Griezmann was right there patrolling the areas with Eric Garcia in tow as well, and that was what was more than enough to keep those types of dangers at bay. When attempting to build up from the back, one of the things that was taking place is Neto, from time to time, was actually opting to not pass short to Eric Garcia or Gerard Piqué to build up from the back, but actually spring somewhat of a surprise. And you can imagine that this is a tactical setup from Koeman and company, where they said, hey, Real may be expecting us to build from the back with our talented players, so what we're going to actually do is skip all of that, have Real players move up like this, so even Busquets at times would fake a run towards Neto, pulling in some of the defensive players, and De Jong would do the same thing, basically Pedri here as well. And one of the things that this would do is it would get the whole Real team to be pressed up, and if they're pressed up, then what ends up happening is these guys here are left free. And so Neto, in these types of spots, when he sees a Busquets making a trigger run towards him, instead of passing it right to him or passing it to Piqué and trusting them to go ahead and build it from the back, which they can definitely do, one of the things that Neto was doing oftentimes is actually pinging the ball long and seeing if Memphis could control it at his feet or the head or even Braithwaite. And then early on in like the opening minute of the game, this is one of the ways that there was a shot created on goal, because Braithwaite was able to bring it down. He passed it to Memphis, and then he made a cutting run like this, and then he was able to get a shot on goal really early into the game, maybe 40 seconds into the game. The other challenge from building from the back was Real wanted to test the new signing Eric Garcia to see how he would hold up under the steady barrage of pressure. So one of the things that Oyarzabal was good at doing from his left-hand positioning and Januzaj on the right hand was, instead of man marking, he was making these angled runs and positioning himself here when pressing to ensure that a pass to Garcia would cause Garcia to consider his options and think about maybe passing it right back to Neto, resetting the build-up, or going and pinging it long to Piqué, where again Januzaj would come in, Silva would come in, and then eventually they would lose the ball in a very vulnerable area. So one of the things that Garcia was really good with doing is making these tiny movements to get in and out of the press. So if Oyarzabal was pressing heavily, he would just spin on him a bit, he would dribble away a bit from him, and then go ahead and find Dest, and then that would open up the rest of the play. So with his debut match officially in La Liga, Eric Garcia did prove that not only can he hang defensively with the likes of stars like Oyarzabal, who are on the rise, but he was also able to, outside of those one-on-one defensive situations, he was also able to go ahead and beat the press deep into his own territory, where the team is the most vulnerable as they're building out. And once he was able to be press resistant in that way, Real actually had to keep dropping back, and so that negated Neto's passing long to Memphis and Braithwaite, because obviously those guys were more covered over time as Marino and everybody else was dropping back on the Sociedad side. But at the end of the day, that actually then opened up, again, passing outlets from the back, and that allowed Barcelona to get into a rhythm as they were able to use a lot of short passing and creative movement to build up and progress into the Real half. The other key thing to focus on is also how great the midfield trio of Pedri, De Jong, and Busquets worked the whole match. So their positioning was sublime, and they were able to position themselves in between defensive lines. So for example, if Marino and Zubimendi are here, Memphis and Braithwaite would have usually been situated between that midfield defensive line as well as the central defensive line. And what Griezmann was really good at doing is being in these operating areas, and then Dest was out here causing havoc over here on the right-hand side, and then Alba up top on the left-hand side. And so with these guys and their movements, one of the things that would take place is Marino would have to opt between dropping back because they were already down a couple goals, or he would have to push up and figure out what to do with Pedri. And David Silva was actually taken out at the halftime break because he was not able to keep up energetically with the amount of running and defensive work that Real had to do to just contain Barcelona's midfield trio. So with these kinds of positionings and clever movements from the midfield trio here between Busquets, Pedri, and De Jong, they were able to both capitalize on long passing to the wings and short passing and clever movements where Griezmann could then find other opportunities to score and connect with Memphis and Braithwaite up top. The other key thing that Barcelona did really well is when they were defending, they opted to make sure that each player was covered. So if we go back to a build-up example, clearly getting into a clear passing rhythm and momentum was something very, very difficult from the Sociedad side. So coming out of the second half, one of the things that Alguacil instructed his players to do is actually try to build from the back if Barcelona wasn't pressing enough. One of the things that take place is Ramiro has possession of the ball after it has gone out on a Barcelona player. So from the back, he realizes, hey, I have a couple of passing options. So he tries to go to Zubimendi, but actually one of the things that happens is Pedri makes this aggressive pressing move immediately to Zubimendi, so he has to go back. And Ramiro, now stuck, is realizing that the rest of the Barcelona team is pressing up. So Lenormand is getting covered by Griezmann aggressively, and Elizondo is getting covered by Braithwaite. So Ramiro's only option is to go to Munoz out wide, but with Dest pressing in on him, Munoz is not able to find a open David Silva, and so the ball goes out of bounds, and then Barcelona is able to again take the throw in and build up from the attacking third pretty easily. As the match progressed, it was also evident that the Barcelona players had fully grappled with and understood that Lionel Messi's inspiration and magic from out of thin air was not going to be the thing that got them a 4-2 victory. So one of the things that they made mentally in terms of a shift is realizing that they all had to play well with one another, and in order to do that, there were certain things defensively that they were able to accomplish together as a group that with a Messi-led team they wouldn't have naturally pivoted to. So one of the cases was Memphis' aggressive defending in cases where he wouldn't normally opt to do that. For example, there was a free kick where he mishit it and Memphis tracked all the way back to these areas and put the danger at bay. So with Memphis' aggressive defending style, who knows if he can keep that type of a performance the whole season energetically, but what we saw from Memphis and Braithwaite and Griezmann up top was a ton of defensive pressure, and it's pretty clear that when Messi was playing on the team, there was that disunity among the attacking third in terms of their defensive work rate, because Messi wasn't working as hard and he obviously was saving his energy for the creative portions of the team's offensive build-up. But with Messi gone, there's not that clear-cut leader in the offensive third forward unit. In that case, Griezmann, like I mentioned, was able to move back into this right-back role at times, allowing Dest to become a makeshift right winger, and that shored up some of the defensive issues that Barcelona has had. And while it's not ideal, and maybe when Emerson comes into the matches in place of Dest, Griezmann can actually play his favored role, which is right winger, if not central striker, as Memphis is. So if Emerson can come in here over time, then some of the defensive issues may be patched over the way that they are currently being exposed with Dest. And that would allow Griezmann to then serve a similar function where Memphis can come out here, Griezmann can go in the middle and become more of the scoring option that he is known as throughout his career. The same type of philosophy also transcended backwards into the team too. So with Pedri, De Jong, and Busquets, they were pressing and positioning themselves defensively better than ever, and they were also looking for not a Messi-like player to pass into, because someone of that caliber doesn't exist, but they were able to ensure that their movement combined with the movements of others on the forward line was able to lead to the 8 shots on target that were mentioned earlier in the video. So overall, this was a very expansive and cohesive display of footballing from Barcelona. With Messi gone, it was clearly a very hyped up match to see how the team would perform in this era they find themselves in, which is without their living legend available for selection. It's great to say that post-match, it became evident that this is a team that could hold it together, and they will challenge in the Champions League and in the top half of the La Liga table, and this is not going to be a Barcelona team that rolls over, especially with the performance that they've had. Yes, it's against a Real Sociedad team that's a little bit weaker with Isak missing. With Isak there, the threat would have been a little bit heavier on Piqué and Garcia, who were just in their first match as a collective defensive unit and partnership. With a performance like this in the league, it remains to be seen how Real Sociedad also do to build on this, because there were clearly question marks throughout the squad in terms of their performance, their ability to hang together defensively as a unit. There were lots of question marks about the amount of chances that Barcelona was able to create, as well as when Real had possession of the ball, they were not very keen to connect with one another. In fact, a common thread was Real would win the ball and then immediately pass it forward, but then those midfielder players would get pressed by Barcelona's aggressive counter-pressing, so then they would pass the ball right on back. So there were very many combinations where the ball would go into the midfield only for there to be no passing options up the line, so then they would go right back down the pitch off to the defensive line for the possession to be recycled. So those types of issues will need to be sorted out over time by Alguacil, and with Koeman on the other end, this was a great performance and something he'll be keen to build off of as the new season gets underway.